I'd like to welcome everyone to our workshop on teaching international students from around the world, promoting class participation. We're grateful to the Center for Educational Innovation for inviting us to offer this workshop, and we're also very happy to see you here, and we hope that this will be a beneficial experience for you. I'm Ellen Dussard. I'm Director of International Student and Scholar Services at UB, and my co-organizers are Keith Otto, who is over here, and he will tell you what he does when he presents, and also Professor Namsuk Kim is our other co-organizer. We have 3 student presenters, and they're also going to introduce themselves. Our goals today are to increase awareness of the cultural dimensions of class participation, and also to provide tips to encourage or make it easier for international students to participate in class. First, I'd like to talk about some cultural assumptions, some of which are risky and some of which are useful. I'm sure you would all agree that it's risky to assume that all cultures are the same, and this is also true when it comes to class participation. In some countries, the prevailing attitude among students in class is the first one in wins. So as soon as a teacher asks a question, hands shoot up, and the hand that shoots up is the fastest is the winner, and students raise their hands before they've even thought about what they're going to say. And I've experienced this in my teaching experience, teaching English as a second language. But it's also true that in many cultures there are reasons why students would be extremely reticent to participate in class, and that is going to be our focus today. We're going to be looking at the cultural, social, linguistic, psychological reasons why many international students, including those at UB, would be reticent to participate in class. It's also risky to assume that the same action or behavior has the same meaning everywhere, and we're going to be examining cases where action on or behavior on the part of a US student would mean one thing, but that same action or behavior on the part of an international student would mean something very different. And another way of saying this is that it's risky to assume that what you meant in a situation is what was understood, or what the person engaged in the action meant is what you understood. Of course, we believe that that people behave rationally in the context of their culture. So some behaviors which might not make sense to Americans would be very rational from the perspective of the international student. And of course, we believe that everyone gets along better when they understand the reasons for one another's actions, and that's why we offer cross-cultural workshops. So I'd like to start out by asking you some questions. How do you feel about class participation? Do you welcome students' questions, comments, or do you view it as a negative thing?
Remember it.
Okay. He said when students are more engaged in the content, they're more likely to remember it. Anybody else?
Shy to ask questions.
Okay. So the question can be helpful for other students in the class who need similar clarification, but who may not be as courageous to ask a question. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So the instructor knows how effectively he or she is communicating the material. Okay. Sometimes students may feel it's forced, and in that sense, it might be a negative thing. So let's look at this from a cultural standpoint. So from an American perspective, asking questions in class is typically viewed as in a positive way. It's a sign of interest, motivation, preparation. It makes the class more interesting. It's welcomed by the professor because it enables him or her to gauge what the students understand and to ensure that they're on the right track. And it makes his or her work more interesting. Of course, if the volume and the frequency of the questions becomes excessive, it can become disruptive. I neglected to mention that class participation could also be viewed as showing off. Okay, the point we would like to make today is that in contrast to sort of a typical American perspective that class participation is a positive thing, For many, if not most, international students at UB, class participation is viewed in a more negative light. And these would be some of the reasons. Okay, so from the perspective of a lot of international students, asking a question in class can reveal a lack of understanding and a lack of preparation. It could and constitute an embarrassment to the student by revealing that one did not understand. It can even be viewed as an insult to the professor, because the fact that the student needs to ask a question in order to receive clarification exposes the fact that the instructor did not explain it clearly. Had the instructor explained it clearly, the student would have understood and there would be no need to ask a question. Asking questions in class can also be viewed as a selfish act, because the student is interrupting the lecture or the class plan in order to have his or her needs met at the expense of the other students who are receiving valuable information from the faculty member, and that process is disrupted by the student who wants to have his or her needs met. And it's just so it becomes a waste of everyone's time except for the one student who wants the answer. And it also is an inconvenience to the professor, because he or she has to interrupt what he or she was doing in order to meet the needs of that one student. It can also be viewed as a challenge to authority, and many of our students would view asking questions in that way. And it can also be viewed as showing off. So I think we can see here a pretty big difference between how Americans view class participation as largely positive and how many international students would view class participation as a negative thing for a lot of reasons which are outlined here. And now Maya Devi is going to talk in more detail about the cultural dimensions of international students' perspective on class participation.
Hello everyone, my name is Maya Devi Mukhbat. I'm a sophomore student in University of Buffalo, and I'm from Mongolia. So now I'm going to talk about saving face. So face is one's pride, dignity. It's how others view you. So there's a deep concern about losing face for oneself, one's group, or even people outside one's group. As for me personally, we were taught that when we go abroad, how we present ourselves is how other people are going to view Mongolian people. So therefore, any mistake or embarrassment is shared by all members of one group. And for example, if I do badly in class, I would be worried that that's how people around me is going to view Mongolian students, as unprepared and lazy. So this leads to face-saving approaches, where, for example, not admitting that one did not understand, and thus not asking questions about it. Now let's move on to importance of group harmony. So group harmony is paramount and is achieved through sensitivity to turn-taking and discussions. It's when person who was talking realizes that they've been talking for a while, and they start asking questions from other people who didn't get the chance to talk, and allowing and giving them the opportunity to express their thoughts. In group talk, time spent sensing others' moods before offering an opinion is also very important. To avoid direct disagreements and problems that might arise from it. And so they use indirect and cautious speech in order to avoid said public disagreements. Since group harmony is paramount and individual needs are less important, many international students will likely to not speak up during discussions, as they will not feel comfortable jumping in, and they will expect others to give them a chance to speak, and therefore will keep quiet until they give an opportunity. They will also not interrupt anyone, because interrupting is considered extremely impolite, and they will also try to avoid all face-to-face disagreements. They will try to sense how others feel before they say anything. They will also likely not speak up if they disagree with the views expressed by others, and therefore they may even express agreement with ideas or suggestions expressed by others even if they don't agree themselves. And now, Chao Zhao will talk about Chinese students. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chao Zhao. I'm a PhD student from Foreign and Second Language Education Program. Now I will share with you about classroom culture of Chinese students. Firstly, I want to talk about our previous school experience, which is so different from American students' school experience. Classroom discipline and the importance of collectivism are taught very early in China, which is in the beginning of elementary school. Since China is a collectivistic society, we are used to consider collective honor over ourselves or over personal honor. That's why when we do well for ourselves, we feel proud. But if we do well for our group, we feel even more proud. We become more self-conscious and silent as we grow up. That is because we don't want to lose friends by showing off. For us, humility and silence are viewed as being intelligent. So sometimes, even though we know the answer, we choose not to say anything. And also, we don't want to lose face, consider that our question or answer could be wrong. Although English language is very popular in China, English education still focuses on grammar and vocabulary. Therefore, we tend to have difficulty understanding and expressing ourselves in English. And also, relationship between teachers and students in China is very different, which is like respectful and distant. It is under the influence of the long history of Confucianism in China. Let me introduce more about Confucius. Confucius was a very well-known philosopher in China, in Chinese history. He had enlightened over 3,000 students, and among them, over 70 have been recorded as well-known philosophers, so that he is viewed as the model teacher for 10,000 ages in China. Because of him, we view teaching as a highly respectful profession in China. Next, I want to talk about our assumptions. We are very accustomed to everyone having the same standard knowledge. That is because most of us are single child at home, so our friends are our classmates with whom we learn and grow up together. Because of that, sometimes we see no need to express anything that is common sense or known to all. In classroom discussion, we are not used to providing background knowledge or defining context because we assume everyone have already know it all. So sometimes when we make comments in class in US, our classmates and professor may feel confused about it. As a result of the above reasons, we may fail to consider that people have different assumptions. Okay, let's move to Chinese students' attitude about classroom participation. Because we grew up in collectivistic society, we tend to see ourselves through others' eyes, so that sometimes we are silent in class mainly because we don't want to appear stupid in front of others, and we are afraid of making mistakes in English. Mostly, we don't want to sound rude due to poor word choice or lack of polite phrases. Also, sometimes we are not quite sure if our question is good or not, or other classmates may have the same one, so that we choose to keep quiet and wait. Okay? Sometimes after professors ask questions, we do need more time to organize our thoughts and determine how to express ourselves before raising hands. We seldom ask questions during class because we don't want to feel like challenging professors by showing doubt in the ideas professor just taught us. And also, we don't want to interrupt professor and our classmates because for us it is very rude. So we prefer to ask questions after class individually. In China, we have lots of tests ever since primary school, so that we are trained for standardized tests. And this may lead to a result that we are not used to asking and answering open-ended questions. Okay, for the last part, I want to talk about our experiences in the US classroom. When I first came here, I was so surprised that professor did not spend the entire class lecturing, which is very common in China. We are used to teacher-centered teaching style. In China, when teacher lecturing in class, we'll be very busy, listening carefully, and taking notes. Moreover, we are surprised that US students answer easy questions, because in China, teachers only ask very challenging questions. Therefore, when US teachers ask easy questions, we won't answer it immediately, because we don't think teachers really need an answer, so that by answering it, it's mainly to show off. Also, we will consider easy question is like an insult for intelligence, that kind of way, so that the question itself could be some kind of a trap. And also, we are surprised that US students raise their hands before they think about what they want to say after they are called on. For us, we need to prepare our answer beforehand. Sometimes we do feel bad about lack of participation because US students were very active and expressive. We don't want to interrupt them. And it turns out we lose our chance to provide opinions. US students like to talk anecdotes and jokes. We wish we could share the laughter, but somehow it's hard to understand due to different cultural backgrounds. And this part is what we want to learn the most. Okay, after my introduction about Chinese student thoughts, let's welcome Kyung-ah to share with us about Korean students' experience.
Thank you, Chao. Hello, everyone. I'm Kyung-ah Lee from Korea, and I'm a master's student in higher education program. Now, I will talk about the experiences Korean students had in Korean school and their attitude toward class participation. We have two cultural values that influence class participation. The first one is education culture value, which I think is one of the greatest value in Korea. It has changed, but we still have one-way instruction teaching style. Compared to American higher education, we have fewer colleges to attend. That means not everyone can go to college. So we especially focus on Korean college entrance exam. Moreover, we have a national curriculum for secondary education that requires for us to know so many topics and subjects. We don't want passive learners, but we have to in order to cover everything. Teachers need to teach all the key knowledges and required knowledges, so there's no time for discussion. Actually, one-way lecture teaching style has been effective in Korea for a long time, and students are trained to memorize many things. Additionally, Korea college entrance exam tests students' English proficiency based on grammar and reading. That's why many Korean students have difficulty with speaking and writing when they're coming here. This is how my Korean friends and I were trained for more than 10 years. The second culture value is accepting and respecting. Korean culture is known as collectivistic, which means that group harmony is considered more important than individual goals. Some may ask, so if you want to have a harmonious group, don't you have to contribute and actively participate? My answer is yes, but Korean students contribute in different ways. Since Korean students are collectivistic, it's hard to criticize and give negative feedback to friends because they will get embarrassed and lose face, so I try to protect and save their faces. Furthermore, it can negatively affect my relationship with my friends if I criticize them during the discussion. During the class time, we don't really ask questions because we don't want to waste others' time by holding up the lecture and causing class to end late. I see this as a sort of peer pressure as well. Also, Korean students who are active and ask a lot of questions may be seen as not just a good student, but showing off, which Korean students don't really appreciate it. If they show off, students may be bullied, ignored, or isolated from the group members. There is saying that empty vessels make the most noise. In Korea, silence is considered as modesty. Confucianism. There is a clear hierarchy that is influenced by Confucianism. So we have to respect people who are older and have authority. If I interrupt the conversation while seniors are talking, I'll be considered a rude person. During class, Korean students don't ask questions because we don't want to interrupt the flow of lecture, draw others' attention to me, or embarrass the teacher by asking challenging questions. So we listen actively as a form of respect. As you can see, what Korean students experience in Korea is really different from American students' experience. Then how do Korean students feel about class participation in the United States? One of the big challenges that Korean students face here is the language barrier. Korean students hesitate to ask questions in class because we assume that I don't understand what professors are saying. Maybe it's because of my language problem, and I have to handle it by myself, not in a class. And I'm not really sure whether my questions are good or thought-provoking questions that will benefit all classmates. And if not, I don't want to lose my face being seen as not understood. Free discussion. Sometimes I'm really amazed how American students participate in discussion. They seem to raise their hands first, then start talking while thinking and organizing their thoughts. And they're also very good at jumping into the conversation and discussion. However, Korean students don't do that way. We take time to prepare our comments. Due to our previous classroom experiences, we can freely express our thoughts. Plus, it's really hard to think while talking and thinking simultaneously in our second language. And if I take time, I'm afraid of others' reaction because I'm not sure how willingly and patiently they're gonna wait for me. When there is free discussion, I do prepare my questions, comments in advance. One time, I was waiting for an opportunity to participate, to share my thoughts, but one classmate said the same thing that I prepared, so I lost my chance. And I was about to say something, but the opportunity was taken away by American classmate. Jokes and American talks. I have a story. One time, my American friend was joking about something that I have no clue about. But I couldn't really ask him like, oh, excuse me, what were you just joking about? So I just pretend that I understood and I just smiled. Unfortunately, that wasn't the right response that my friend expected from his joke. So that was very awkward and embarrassing moment. And of course, I couldn't continue the conversation with him because I couldn't understand. This happens in the classroom as well. When there is a discussion about American jokes, actors, cartoons, as an example in discussion, and everyone starts laughing except me, but I just laugh, though I can't really relate it. So those are the major things that usually Korean students experience in the classroom in the United States. So now Dr. Kim will provide the tips on class participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyung-ah, and good morning, everyone. My name is Nam-soo Kim. I am Clinical Assistant Professor in the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy and Assistant Director in the Graduate School of Education, Center for Comparative and Global Studies and Education. And as we hear from our student presenters about international students' assumptions and experiences, I would like to share some tips for our U.S. faculty. It is our hope that you will consider using some of them as some of the ways that we can promote our international students' class participation and therefore help them to succeed academically in the U.S., thus global university. The first, please avoid assumptions. Many of U.S. faculty members might assume students' lack of English proficiency equals to their lack of academic competence, which is not always true. Many of the international students might need or can use additional support to improve their oral and written English skills. However, it does not mean they are incapable of succeeding academically. And also, you might find some of the international students avoid eye contact with you in or out of class, and they are showing respect. This does not mean they are not interested in your lecture or they are not prepared for your classes. And also, as you heard from our students, the silence is a powerful way for them to express their respect as well. Those in your classes, silent students, are not interested in your lecture, or they're not, they don't have any problem in your courses. So they might be conveying their deep respect for you by means of silence or few questions. And now I'd like to share some of the select results of the current recent International Student Scholar Services survey with current international students at UB. As you can see, 37% of our current international student respondents said they are not participating actively in some or most UB classes. 37% of them. And we wonder why. The reason that they don't participate actively in classes, in our UB classes, are as follows by ranking order. First, 42% of our international respondents said, I'm afraid of making a mistake or asking a stupid question. They are afraid of them. And second, I feel shy. Third, I prefer to be quiet and listen to the professor. This is the way they were trained in their previous school experiences in their home countries. Fourth, I don't have confidence in my English ability. Fifth, I'm not comfortable with the idea of speaking in class. And then, I don't want to show off, as Chao said. And I would like to participate, but I don't find an opportunity, just as Kyung-ah shared with us. I can understand the professor or my classmates well. I don't want to disrupt the professor's speech by asking a question, any question. I'm afraid my classmates will laugh at me because of the accent. And I want to show my respect to my professor by being quiet and modesty. We are just reminded of Maya Devi's story. So this is true. And then, what do our international students need from their professors? These are their sincere suggestions for your consideration. Here, 59% of the students ask you to be friendlier, and encourage students, all students, to ask questions. 53% of the students would appreciate it if you could put them in small groups so that they can discuss in class, if and when possible. And also, if you could require class participation in your syllabus and make it clear, then it might be easier for them to participate in class. And also, if possible and when preferable. And in addition, I would like to ask you to consider trying ways to make sure you are understood clearly by your student. And the first, especially in the beginning of the semester, please speak a little bit more slowly because the time is very important for their academic and cultural transitions. And then second, as you heard from our student presenters, some slang and American colloquial expressions are very difficult for them to understand. So many international students might benefit from your explanations. And then in class, when you change topics, using transitions such as, now we are going to talk about the next concept, will be helpful for international students. And the other thing that I would like to share with you and ask you to consider using is using examples that every student can understand. For example, the NFL or No Child Left Behind, many Americans hear very often on the media. Before international students learn more about them, they are not well known or all known to all international students. So your brief mention of what it means and explanation would be very helpful. And now Keith will share more of these suggestions for US faculty.
All right, hello everybody. I'm Keith Otto. I'm the Program Director for English as a Second Language at the English Language Institute. We're going to wrap up with a few more tips here, and then we'll have time for some of your questions. So, a few more tips. We would encourage being very direct in letting students know about your expectations for participation and your willingness to take questions, or at what point you're interested in listening to questions. The key here is to be very direct, to state very explicitly what you want, because we're having to overcome these really ingrained habits of what is appropriate or what is successful academic behavior. So asking someone to change something from what they've grown up knowing is correct is very difficult. And if it's ambiguous, they're going to, all of us would take the safe route and just keep going with what we have known to be true all of our lives. So being very clear about what participation is, how you would define that. Does that mean you want interruptions, or does that mean you want students to hold questions to certain points in time? Also being very direct about how this will affect grading. As we saw in the previous slide, this can be a good motivator for some students, that they know it's actually part of their grade. We would also recommend repeating this message throughout the semester, especially for students who are new to the U.S. in their first semester. The syllabus and everything that happens in those first couple weeks can be kind of a blur, so it might be good to come back around later in the semester and repeat that. Similarly, again, continuing with the theme of being very direct about your expectations, telling students very directly it is your responsibility to ask questions. If you want questions, let them know repeatedly and by different methods that this is expected. Much more easy for many of our international students would be the opportunity to use written communication. So if it fits within your teaching methods, you might encourage that students use email more often, or to participate with discussion boards. If that's something you've never tried, you might try that to see what types of participation you got from your students. You might be pleasantly surprised with that. And finally, because office hours are not familiar in a lot of other countries and academic systems, you might benefit from specifically inviting students or specifically inviting international students, or those who seem to be quiet, or those who seem to be having difficulty, giving a personal invitation to them to come and visit you in office hours. Because again, being unfamiliar with the system, they're unlikely to make use of that when they're not sure exactly how that would be viewed. With regard to structuring actual speech in class, if at all possible, you might think about ways to facilitate more turn-taking. Absent that, you're going to get a couple dominant students, jumping in whenever there's an opportunity for questions or conversation. This, of course, works much better in smaller groups. Many of our international students report that they are interested in participating and would respond positively if called upon. So don't assume that because they're not volunteering, that means that they have no interest in answering questions. You may be pleasantly surprised by the results if you call on them more often. As we heard from some of our students, the issue of time is very important when considering participation, especially unscripted or live participation. So if possible, try to think about, or try to give yourself permission to wait longer when you ask questions. Or if there is silence, don't assume that something has gone wrong. It may be that your students are just furiously trying to organize a couple sentences and would appreciate that longer wait time. If at all possible, though, it would be better to give them discussion questions in advance. If you know questions that you're going to use in a particular class, and you don't mind missing out on the spontaneity of those questions, many international students will work quite hard to prepare their ideas at home, and would love to be able to share those organized answers that they feel more confident about, answers that they're less concerned about whether they've made mistakes because they had a chance to craft them. Again, you'll see those same results with online participation, discussion boards and whatnot. What will work really well is the simple think, pair, share activity, where students have a chance to rehearse their ideas with a partner before being exposed to possible embarrassment in front of the large group. They have a chance to share it with one partner or with a small group and to see that, yes, that is a good idea, or that is a good answer, or that is a question that everybody has, then they'll be much more willing to share that in front of the large group and in front of you, the high status professor that they're trying to be respectful toward. In terms of small group discussions, there are some simple techniques that can be used for organizing how these work so that they are more productive than just saying, talk to people next to you. Simple guidelines about roles, assigning leaders, assigning a note taker, assigning someone to summarize at the end. Sometimes that can be helpful. But also other guidelines with regard to things like turn taking. Simple directions like in your groups, make sure that everybody has said at least one thing before any of you say a second thing. I mean, simple techniques like that can often produce good results. I would encourage students to, if they are concerned about their English, to be the first person to speak. Or again, maybe in groups you could say, okay, as you're forming your small groups, I'd like the person who has spoken the least in their groups this semester to give their answer first, or something like that, so that they have that chance to say what they've been planning to say, as we heard from Kyung-an. Finally, in terms of group work, we would recommend being more deliberate in how you structure those groups in terms of who's in the groups. If left to their own devices, most of us will tend to self-segregate with people from our own countries, internationals as well as domestic students. And unfortunately, this means then that we're missing the opportunities for cross-cultural exchange, and our domestic students are missing the opportunity to actually benefit from being at such an internationalized global university that UB is. There are some links here, other presentations that have been done by UB's international students. Most of this is student-generated content. Many very insightful and articulate international students, most of whom are in PhD programs here at UB or have been over the years, from many other countries, including several that are not represented here today. But we would recommend taking a look at some of these for more depth on some of the countries that your students come from. At this point, we're going to open it up for questions.
During international student orientation, we do not specifically advise students to reach out to their professor and advise him or her about cultural classroom differences.
I'll add that it's often hard to describe your own culture until you've lived in another one and seen the contrast, so it actually might not produce great results to tell a brand new student, tell us what's different about your culture. So, but encouraging them to meet their instructors, and again, as faculty, encouraging your students to come and meet you, that's only going to be helpful, even if your list of bullet points isn't as clear at the beginning. But
okay, this is a very, very common situation. Students don't want to lose face by revealing to you that they don't understand what you said, but they don't want to cause you to lose face by also revealing that you weren't clear. So in our office, we never ask the question, do you understand? Because it just doesn't produce reliable information. So we would say things like, okay, could you just summarize what I just said to be sure I didn't miss anything? Or, okay, so now what are you going to do? Knowing that this information, what are you going to do now? And if we can hear from the student a summary of what, then we're confident they understood. But barring that, we would not, as you said, just accept a nod or a smile or the answer yes. Another thing you can do is send an email message afterwards, just kind of summarizing what you discussed, and that would also then they'll have that for future record, and they can spend time reading it, looking up words they might not know, and so on, and that pretty much ensures that they got it. And you can ask them to respond to the email with their plan, for example.
If I could add, and maybe sharing your lecture notes with the key points would be very helpful, and also opening up the venues so that students can bring their questions in the following week would be very helpful. And also in my cases, in my undergraduate and graduate courses, I use the UB Launch venues very actively. So I open up the forum anytime. If you have any question, you can post a question there, and you can send me the question. So opening up our hours and not limited to our classroom time and the office hours, and that will help international students and encourage them to approach us with questions.
So, yeah, we can easily understand that sometimes faculty would turn to undergraduate academic advisors and say the student is having trouble and essentially fix it, right? Yeah, that's the expectation. I think I personally would not have much trouble getting past the students reluctant to ask for help. I would be very aware of the fact that the student may not understand fully the academic predicament that he or she is in. And to give you an example, I had a student in my office once who had been academically dismissed, and I found out he had no concept of academic dismissal. Because in his country, you fail all your classes in your first year of university, you just retake them the next year. If you fail them all again, you retake them the third year. There was no such thing as academic dismissal. He had no concept. So I would be very clear. You know, this is what is happening from the perspective of your professor, and this is what can happen to you as a result. And we don't want you to have to leave UB. We want you to be successful here. So we need to talk about what you can do to make sure that you succeed. And these are some things that are available to you. These are resources and so on. But also try to get to the bottom of why the student isn't succeeding. Some students may not be going to class because they may not think that's important. They may be experiencing that sort of freshman freedom away from parents and behaving irresponsibly and not making the right choices about how to spend their time. They may not be choosing the right friends, and so on and so forth. So I wouldn't be bashful about trying to find out exactly what's going on, making it absolutely clear what can happen if you don't change your ways, and giving some really explicit advice about this is where you can go, and I want you to report back to me. If you think they need counseling, then you would recommend that, and then you need to come back and tell me that you went, and so on. Okay.
I personally wish my advisor is source of encouragement and give me confidence and open-minded. I can reach professor like personally, oh, I have this issue, but I wish my professors are understanding my concerns. So I wish my academic advisor is the bridge between me and professor. I wish my advisor is telling me that, oh, these are common issues. It's not only you having language barrier, and it's natural thing. It's your second language. How can you speak like negative? Oh, you can be successful. You can be, so that's like encouragement is really a lot mean to me. So, and since you have contact with professor, you meet with professors a lot, that you can tell them like our concerns, what's happening, why they're not very quiet in class. So I really hope academic advisor can be bridge between students and professors. Yeah.
Something to say. Because I'm from China. China is like a highly collectivistic country, as I mentioned. So we feel like we are like a single drop from an ocean, that kind of way. So we do prefer like a special attention that an academic professor could give us, like a for example, like a one-on-one talk or like a written form of feedback. That will help a lot. We will take it very serious, and then we will think it's very helpful.
As for me personally, during my freshman year, it was really hard for me to reach for help. But like talking through email really helped for me, because then I can actually organize my thoughts and like think about what I'm gonna ask. And I guess email is better than like sitting face to face. Yeah.
One quick tip that I use that works really well for me is to really understand where the student's coming from, what the student understands, what the student assumes. I just ask this question: if we were in Bangladesh right now and you were in this situation, what would be happening? And then I use that as a starting point, pointing out similarities and differences, and this is what needs to happen here.
So this professor had every student bring a question, or told every student that they must bring a question to the following lecture. This is a great technique. This can be done at the end of class, where students don't have as much time to think about it, but this is a very simple way of getting feedback at the end of a lecture as to how clear it was. But I think it's a great technique to use for students. Again, it lets students jump right in, right off the bat, and ask their question before the conversation has turned to some other direction. I guess I would also recommend, before they share it in the large group, share it in a small group, just because if they're self-conscious or embarrassed and they discover, yeah, their classmates had similar questions, then I think they would be less nervous about asking it to the professor directly. So.
The reason it worked is because you did the right thing. And there's nothing to be suspicious about it. It's a great technique. I want to share a similar technique. I'm an old ESL teacher. Heath Namsuk and I are ESL teachers. And one thing I would do in class is I would say, everybody has to say something. We're just going to go around and everyone has to say something. You can say, I would like to pass. That's okay. But you have to say something. But what I found out was my students were sitting there with these gems of thoughts in their mind, and they weren't saying them. And by requiring everyone to say something, all of this came out, and it was wonderful. I had the same reaction you did to the 20 wonderful questions that you received at the beginning of class. Yeah, I appreciate Kritika's comment that it discourages participation when the professor treats that student as an informant or a cultural ambassador. We conducted a survey, as you know, and you have the results on the back, but you don't have the comments. And one thing that was mentioned more than once was our students not wanting to participate in class because they were ridiculed by the American students in the class, and maybe even by the professor. They talked about students hissing at them, American students, and students making fun of them. So I think in your role as faculty, you can set the tone for the interaction in your classroom and ensure that that doesn't happen.
Like I mentioned earlier, since there are not many Mongolian students at this university, whenever I do something, I feel like I'm representing Mongolia. So I have to be very careful in everything that I do, including in class. So if I don't participate that well, I'm like always worried that that's how my professor is going to think about all Mongolians. Like, we're lazy, we're unprepared. So yeah, thank you for mentioning it.
It's my 6th year in Buffalo. I did my undergrad, and I'm a grad student right now. But compared to American student, I don't participate that much in class still. I know that's how I've been trained over like more than 10 years. And also, it's really hard to jump in the conversation somehow. And like if there's like free discussion, like I'm thinking, but they're already talking. So what I thought, they already spoke. So I know that's what I feel. Still after like 6 years, I still feel uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah. This is my 2nd year in UB, and I think I really like the active class participation because it creates more friendlier environment, and I don't feel pressured. I mean, I have to answer, but I don't feel pressured into like answering it. So, well, personally, I like it, even though it's still hard for me to like just jump into conversations and like talk to my professor, but I like it.
One thing more, so like undergrad here, it's such a big class, 500 people in Knox 20. So even after 4 years, I didn't have to chance participate actually. I didn't get training, any training in such a big class. So even in grad school, that's actually my first time really can participate in. So even if I was here for like 6 years, I didn't really have chance to participate, I would say, yeah.
Talk about this. I really think from my own experience, like I'm kind of shy at the first, so some kind of like ice-breaking activities, like we go familiar with each other, that really help a lot. Help us to open up, to know each other. That's the way, like in the further classes, we can just participate more and want to speak more. That really help.